Okay, so yeah, guys, actually today I'm just going to be showing you some moments from my games in from the Vegas Open, and there's a lot of really interesting games, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm basically just going to be showing you kind of like a mix of positions today. Just ask you to try to come up with a move or make a decision or find a plan. It's going to be kind of variety, so sometimes mostly it'll be tactical, but it's not going to be um, only tactical. There's going to be some, positional, and hopefully we'll get to the end game as well. So the way this will work is I'll put a position on the board. I'll give you guys maybe up to 5 minutes total, but I'm going to ask you guys to just suggest a move after 1 minute, just so I can kind of see like where you're at, what your kind of intuition is telling you. Then after you suggest a move, then I'll give you up to like maybe 5 minutes. Maybe it'll kind of depend to actually like think a little bit deeper about the position and try to figure out what to do. So this first one here, I'm just going to play through the opening so you guys can see how we got here. I was white. We had Slav defense, and I played knight c3 and e3. Anyone play d4 with white and play against the Slav and play e3? It's a lot of it's a lot of questions. Or does anyone play the semi-Slav? Anyone play this position from either side? Because we end up getting a semi-Slav with e3, and here black plays a6. Okay, used to and sometimes. Gotcha. Is anyone familiar with this variation with a6? Anyone see this one before? Yeah. It's an interesting move. This a6 move in the Slav, it's kind of like a waiting move, like waiting for white to move the bishop so you can take on c4 and go b5. But it also kind of allows you to play b5 at some point as well. a6 is also useful if you end up playing c5. Yeah, okay, I'll try not to spoil anyone's prep. Sorry. If it's a secret, maybe don't tell me, because I'm not gonna know not to say it out loud to everyone. Okay, so yeah, pretty solid line. I played b3. This is one of the main ways white deals with this, just defending the c4 pawn. So if black takes, we can take back with the pawn, also getting ready to develop the bishop. And here black goes bishop b4, bishop d2, and now bishop b2, I think white runs into some issues with like knight e4 and queen a5. So this is kind of annoying. So the point of bishop b4 is to force white's bishop to d2, knight d7, bishop d3, castles, castles, and here black goes bishop to d6. Quick question for everyone. Why does the bishop need to go to d6 at this moment? What is the problem after both sides have castled here? Actually, let me close the chat so you guys can just send your answers to me directly. So the question is, why does black need to play bishop d6 here? Or queen e7, I think, is also a reasonable move. Yeah, a few of you guys have spotted this one, because here white is actually threatening to go knight takes d5. Kind of a surprising tactic. And then if bishop takes d2, we have knight takes f6 with check, and queen takes d2. And if knight takes d5, knight takes d5, then what is white doing there? Yeah, c takes d5, bishop takes d2, and then white can take on e6, and is temporarily a piece down, but black has two pieces hanging, and white has won some pawns, so white's going to be up a pawn there in the end, looks like. Yeah, let's see if we can make some move. Let's say like rook e8, for example. Then this would be the idea. Takes, takes, and then, yeah, very important move, d takes e6. If we just took here, then this would not be anything hugely special for white, just kind of normal structure. But yeah, this is kind of usually the key move in the combination. This is what allows us to snag a pawn. And yeah, big problem for black. So Okay, black goes bishop d6. I decide to play h3. I think it was probably better to just go e4 right away in this position, kind of like typical break for white to open up the bishop. But okay, h3 is kind of like preparing it, and here black played b5. Okay, so this is kind of like first moment. I'll give you guys a chance to think about it from here. Let's put 5 minutes on the clock. And so don't send me any answers yet. I want you guys to actually think for a good minute first. Then after 1 minute, you can send me some suggestions, and then I'll have you guys think a little bit more kind of to calculate deeper. Okay, well, 1 minute starting now. Okay, 1 minute is up. So if you want, you can send me like a first guess, and it'll be good for me to. So this doesn't have to be your answer necessarily, just your kind of first instinct or what you would play if you had to make a move. And then it'll just give me a chance to gauge where we're at, and I might have you guys think a little bit longer. Okay, so a few suggestions here for e4. But on e4, there's one critical move that we need to calculate. Maybe someone can quickly suggest it in the chat. Right, b4. So if you want to play e4 in this position, you have to fully calculate the consequences of b4, because that could be a tactical problem. But okay, let me have you guys keep thinking about it from here. And yeah, let's do about 3 minutes, and then I'll ask you guys for maybe some variations. But for now, you don't have to write anything. Just try to think and calculate. Okay, I'll give you guys some feedback in the chat. Okay, guys. If you have some answer, let me know in the chat. Also, if you want to say something out loud, just send me an exclam. I'll happily call on you. Yeah, we had a couple different answers here. Okay, so yeah, there are a few suggestions for like a3 here. I think the critical move is the move e4, and we'll take a look at how this one could work. I ended up playing in the game queen c2 because I couldn't make e4 work. a3, kind of preparing this break, it's a little bit slow, and what black can do is actually similar to what black does in the game, which is just to take twice on c4, and then black executes kind of their key idea in these structures. Maybe one of you guys can quickly type black's move in the chat. A lot of people are saying e5. Yeah, e5 is definitely a very thematic idea, but I would say here, with this pawn being weak, we really want to go c5 from black's point of view and open up the light-scored bishop. Yeah, but e5 is also a very thematic idea in the semi-Slav. It comes up a lot. But here, we definitely want not only to open up the bishop, but also exchange off this weak pawn. And yeah, if black can get this break in comfortably, black should be totally fine. Like, white should have no advantage. And that was actually the issue in the game. I played queen c2. My opponent took on c4, played c5, and I think was already pretty much equalizing. The game was still very interesting. We'll return to it maybe for another moment. But yeah, let's take a look at e4. So this was kind of the critical move. You could also play c5 here. And then I promise we'll get to e4. And with this move, probably we want to follow it up with either b4 or e4 here. We play e4 in this position. This is possible, but we are kind of giving up the d5 square, and then one day black will play for the e5 break. So this is often leading to, let's say, kind of an unclear position. Hard to really judge this one. If we start with b4, then I think it makes sense for black to play for e5, maybe throwing in a5 first and then e5. And if black can get this break in again comfortably, then black is probably okay, though it's still very fighting position. So yeah, the nice thing about e4 is that we take this space without committing the pawn to c5. And if black was just forced to take on e4, something like this, then okay, white is very happy here. We have pressure on this weakness. we have this like queen c2 move coming up, the bishop has been opened up, the rooks are ready to come to the center, and yeah, white has kind of a nice space advantage here, I would say small plus. So it's really critical if black can get away with this move, b4. And in the game I saw b4, and okay, main trick to notice is after e5, because otherwise this one is just hanging, yeah? So we have to kind of, seems like we have to play e5, b takes c3. I would love to just recapture with the bishop, but what's the issue with this one? I think some of you guys spotted it in your answers. Yeah, knight e4, exactly. And so black is actually keeping the extra piece, right? Because this one is under attack. If bishop takes e4, de4, and hitting the knight, we're not in time to take on d6. And I even considered, in this variation, I considered this move bishop e1. But then in my mind, I was like, it's too weird. Like how could this work, you know? But it turns out, actually, this is one of the best moves, according to the computer. So I kind of rejected it, you know, just because it looks weird, but maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, because if we just keep calculating a little bit, we'll see that once white wins back the piece, white is going to be able to scoop the pawn. I think in my mind, I saw bishop b4, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. You know, this pawn on c3 might be annoying, but again, if we look just a little bit further, we take, and then we can either round up the pawn with queen c2, or even better, to go a3, and we're just going to be winning the pawn pretty soon. Yeah, exactly, a3 and then b4 if we need to. And yeah, so here white is actually getting a nice little advantage. Or if bishop e7, for example, we take on f6, we regain this pawn on c3, and white is just a little bit better because of the structure, right? Black has these isolated and weak pawns, a6, c6, especially the a pawn is going to be kind of a long-term weakness. Not like a huge advantage for white, but fairly comfortable. So yeah, that was one way. Apparently, there's also this idea, knight takes d5, which I didn't even consider, but it's kind of a cool shot. C takes d5, e5, and white is going to be winning the piece back and have kind of like a pleasant structure. I think black should probably take on c4, throw this in. Let's say we recapture, bishop e7, take, and yeah, to me it looks like kind of a pleasant position for white, something like queen e2, then rooks can come to the center, and we have this like hanging pawn structure, but the pawns seem pretty solid. So kind of nice space here for white. So yeah, unfortunately sometimes like you see the right move, but of course you still have to calculate and make it work, because in your mind it feels like tactically it's failing. But yeah, it's so important to like really try to make it work, because if white can play this move e4, white gets a very clear advantage. But of course we have to back it up with the calculation. That's often the hardest part. Okay guys, let's jump to another position. Just one sec here. And let's start at this moment. Okay, so black's last move was c7, c6, and now it's white to play. So we'll do the same thing. I'll put 5 minutes on the clock, and I'll ask you guys to suggest something after 1 minute just to see what your intuition is suggesting, and then I'll give you maybe up to the full 5 minutes to kind of keep thinking about it further. Okay, white to play, starting now. Okay, 1 minute. If you have some suggestion, let me know in the chat. It would be nice to hear from everyone. If you have a move you would, doesn't necessarily have to be the move you would play, just the one you would think is correct or would consider. And then, yeah, you guys can go ahead and keep thinking until the timer runs out. Alrighty guys, yeah, let me know your ideas in the chat, what you would play. And yeah, kind of a weird position, right? Like, I definitely thought white should be better here, because our rook is just nicely developed, and black's knight is tied down to this pawn. Yeah, so this is like kind of awkward for black, and not obvious how to develop the knight, like because the knight isn't able to come out to a6 either. But on the other hand, it's like not clear what white should play in this position. Because if we play h3, which definitely a very reasonable move, black will play bishop h5, and then it's like, well, we have to come up with a decision. How are we going to deal with this pin? How are we improving our position, and so on? Yeah, so I think first move to kind of look at, a lot of you suggested, is queen c2. Kind of like most forcing move, right? Getting out of the pin, hitting h7, and so on. So let's take a look at this one first. Let's see what's happening here. So if black plays bishop takes f3, I guess the first question is, can white take on h7? Because if black doesn't take on f3, then I think white is very happy to get out of the pin. So this would be kind of the critical move to be worried about. Yeah, after bishop takes h7, king h8, we got to recapture the piece, and then g6. Yeah, and if we could take twice on g6, then we could talk about it, but yeah, we can't even take twice because of rook g8. But if the king was on h1 here, then we could take, and at least we have a lot of pawns for the piece, and that could be kind of some interesting compensation. Okay, so yeah, bishop takes h7 is not working, so white would have to just recapture. Then black would probably play something like g6, I think, in this position to try to play against the light-scored bishop. And yeah, let me just ask you guys in the chat, how would you evaluate this position? You can give me human evaluation, like white is slightly better, much better, equal, white is winning, or you can give me a computer evaluation if you prefer. All right, we got a plus equals. White is much better. White is a little better. 0.01. I'll take that as approximately equal. Yeah, I would say white is slightly better here. Still, I think the king is not that weak, right? It's not so obvious how black can actually checkmate us in this position. The pressure on the c-file is real. The light-square bishop being unopposed is real. And white can move the king to h1, play rook g1, play f4. It's nice that we at least, like, we kind of know our plan. So yeah, I would say white is at least slightly better here, maybe something like 0.5. Okay, so yeah, this was an option I definitely considered. And I actually end up playing king h1, which I think just ends up being a little bit slow. But hopefully you guys can probably understand my idea. I'm just kind of improving the position, and then I want to play queen c2, and now with the king off of the h-file, I'm kind of gearing up for this position with takes gf3. Maybe I can still consider taking on h7, we'll see. But I'm just kind of improving the king before possibly going into it. But I don't think this was right, because like my feeling was that I didn't see how black exactly is going to improve their position, because it's very hard to develop. But black actually does have a way to start kind of getting out and slowly equalizing. Maybe you guys could actually suggest a move for black here. What do you think black should do in this position? Let me flip the board. Like from black's point of view, white just played king h1. How can we improve our position from here? Because knight on b8 is definitely an issue. Rook e6 might be possible. The one issue is that it might run into like h3 and bishop f5, and then you have to go back, it seems. Bishop e7 is possible to try to challenge white's bishop for sure. On g6, I think we have to be careful about h3, because then we might not be able to keep the pin like we would want to here with black. And if h3, if we have to kind of give up on the pin, then I think white kind of solves all their problems and will be better. Yeah, a5, definitely an idea here. Actually, just with the point of going a4 and just being a little bit bothersome, like just creating some counterplay. because then there's this threat of a takes b3, and white has to kind of do something about this. You also give yourself the chance to play knight a6 in certain positions if you can kind of make it work tactically. So a5, I would say, is a very useful move here. The move black ended up playing is bishop h5, which also very useful for black in these positions, trying to trade off the light squared bishops so that black can kind of ease up on some of the pressure. Now, it doesn't fully solve the problem of the knight on b8, but it does kind of help, because without the light squared bishops, black can do things like putting the rook on e6 without worrying about bishop f5, and if black is able to kind of slowly get out, then black is fine. Actually, this is kind of what happens in the game. Like, I was quite shocked as white, but I ended up playing this move, rook c2, probably not the best move. My point is, like, I'm just kind of preparing. So if bishop g6, for example, the idea would be to take, and then go like queen d3, bring the second rook to c1, and just keep playing this position. But then instead black played a5, which I think is just a very, very annoying plan for white. And then the idea is just to go a4 and, yeah, just be bothersome, just creating some counterplay, and it's not that obvious what white should do. And actually, after bishop f5, a4, I decided to go b4, which I think is very questionable, because black goes b5, doesn't allow white to make this break. And even though the knight is still tied down to this pawn, the issue with white's play is that now, okay, dark square bishop is of course blocked in, and yeah, if black can just develop the knight, then black is doing absolutely fantastic. So this whole thing didn't really turn out well for white. I think black was already better after this. So let's go back after c6. Yeah, so my plan king h1, I think too slow. This plan of bishop h5, bishop g6 kind of solves all of black's issues. Queen c2, we kind of saw, leads to that slightly better position. What the almighty engine suggests is a move and a plan I didn't really consider, but it often comes up in these positions, was to play the move rook to e1, or start with h3, and then go rook e1, and prepare the break e4, which I don't think too many people suggested. Actually, I don't know if I saw this, but yeah, during the game, it's not often a break you think about, right? Because you're leaving yourself with an isolated queen pawn. But of course, the idea is to open the position while black's development is still pretty bad. And yeah, as it turns out, white is actually, this is how white can really make use of the kind of lead in development. So let's say bishop g6, for example, white can play queen c2. Okay, black trades on d3. And now our next move is e4, bringing the rook to e4, bringing the queen to e4. And yes, our d pawn will be weakened, but it's going to be a much bigger problem for black that, like, everything on this diagonal is under attack, like the pawn, the rook, and yeah, so I think white gets a nice advantage here, like rook e6, e4, and I think white is just doing very, very well. So it's one of those plans like you often don't consider, because positionally it doesn't feel right. Again, giving yourself isolated pawn, usually not a great thing. But here, fully justified, just because it's kind of like the only way to open the position in white's favor. So yeah, I thought this is kind of a interesting point, and kind of the only way that white can really get a big advantage in this position. Again, queen c2, I think we get kind of a small edge here, but h3 and rook e1, or rook e1 right away, followed by preparing e4. Really, really powerful idea. And it is a move you see every once in a while, but it's always surprising. It's like, wow, you know, kind of giving up on the structure. But yeah, really important to look for these kinds of, like, let's say anti-positional moves, because again, they might be working out in a given situation. Okay, guys, let's go to the next position. And just want to yeah, let me grab it here. Okay, so this next one, we're going to take a look at it starting from move 18. And here we are taking black's point of view. Let me give you guys just a second to, like, evaluate the position. And actually, let me just ask you guys. You can let me know in the chat how do you evaluate the position? Who's better and why? All right, we got black is slightly better because of pawn structure and activity. Yeah, white slightly better because of c4 ideas. And we have minus equals plus. Wait, what does minus equals plus mean? Alright, we got black should be slightly better because white has a bad pawn structure and black has a potential attack. Still stuck on this minus equals plus. Sounds like that means black is better, but how much? Slightly better, much better, between the two. Okay, and then we have black is better because knight on f5, white's bishops are bad, and potential attack on the h-file. And then we have +1 and -1. Okay, cool. So actually kind of mixed evals here. Okay, yeah, during the game I was happy with my position here because I felt like, well, currently material is equal, but this h5 pawn is super weak, and one day we have good chances of winning this one. And if we take a look at the structure, it's almost like a French defense, and we've like traded off our bad bishop on c8. So kind of solved the problem of this bad bishop, but that does give white more chances, as was pointed out in the chat, to play c4 and weaken their own bishop. And if they can do this, then black's position could become really dangerous. Okay, so black to play, and c4 is kind of the main move we have to deal with. Let me give you guys 5 minutes on the clock, and I'll ask you what you will play after 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute, guys. If you have a move you'd like to suggest, let me know. And yeah, so actually my first instinct was in line with a lot of what you guys are saying, knight a5. But actually on knight a5, what I didn't like about this move was that, okay, obviously we're stopping knight c4, which is very nice, but we're allowing this move knight to d4. And here I just couldn't find a good move for black, because white wants to, of course, take on f5 and then go like rook d1. If we take on d4, then after cd, the issue is that f5 is coming. And okay, our structure is very pretty, but the position feels like it's about to open up on the light squares, and we might start to actually miss our light square bishop. Also, it's not clear what we're doing with our king anymore. Like, are we playing with the king in the center, or are we going to castle here and then just get mated with like f5, f6? So to me, this one actually looked extremely dangerous. So this is why I kind of avoided knight a5, but I definitely consider this move for quite a bit. So what I ended up playing is rook to c8, because I felt like, well, if I can't go knight a5, then rook c8 kind of feels like next best thing. White does end up playing c4, and now again we have to kind of make a decision. So let me give you guys back your time, and let me put 5 minutes on the clock. Now black to play. I'll ask you guys to really try to calculate here, because it seems like critical position. Black, I think, should be better if we find the right moves, but things could also turn bad very quickly. The position opens up and our king is in the center. So I'll give you guys some time to think about it, and yeah, you can let me know what you would do here. Yeah, feel free to send me some suggestions, guys, if you'd like, and I'll let you, I'll let everyone else keep thinking. Okay, so here we're seeing knight cd4, right? Followed by rook takes c4. And yeah, this is definitely a critical line. But let's try to find the best defense for white. So after knight d4, white will take, knight takes, and then white to play from there. Try to find the most combative move if you want to calculate this variation. Okay, if you have an answer you haven't submitted yet, go ahead and feel free to submit it in the chat, and yeah, we'll take a look at some of our options here. So yeah, in the game, I'll tell you guys my thought process here. I was first looking at this move, knight d4, But what's the issue there for black? Did we figure this one out after takes? Where is white's queen going? Yeah, queen g4, exactly. When I saw queen g4, I was like, ooh, I don't know. Like, rook takes c4. I would love to win the c4 pawn for free, right? Like, not weakening the structure with dc. But then queen takes g7, and I was like, I don't know about that. So then I started looking at d takes c4, and I think this move is very reasonable. Because if queen takes c4, then what can we do here as black? Yeah, e5 go burr, exactly. Knight takes e5, and then queen b5 check. What would be good here? Yeah, maybe knight d7. Though still it could be a little unpleasant after knight e5. Not sure if I fully believe in it for white, but rook d1, it's definitely not over. Like, black has some questions to answer, yeah. Maybe knight d6. Yeah. Yeah, maybe rook c5. Right, if we can trade everything off, I think we're very comfortable with the structure and the extra pawn. Is queen d7 possible? Yeah, queen d7 is actually kind of a funny move here. But you have to see queen takes e5, bishop f6. But I think that's working for black. Yeah, I think in the game I wanted to play knight d7. I was thinking this should be okay for me. But I wasn't totally sure. Then I think white can also throw in rook to d1, which we have to consider, and then take on c4, and that might change things. I definitely considered d4 here, but I feel like it's just not the most ambitious move, although I do like the structure here for black when we get this nice square on c5 for the bishop. So this was definitely a very reasonable try. Okay, finally I returned to this one. And I decided to look a little deeper. I realized maybe things aren't that clear. So takes, queen g4, rook takes c4, queen takes g7, rook takes h5. Here I just decided, in the calculation to just try to look a little bit deeper, right? Because the visualization was still there. So what is the main move that black is probably afraid of? Well, queen g8 check, right? This was the first thing that kind of threw me off, because if bishop f8, bishop a3 seems like a big problem. And king d7, I didn't fully consider because of queen takes f7, right? Giving up this pawn and hanging the rook. But then, okay, I just wanted to return to the position just to give it another try, make it work, because like I really want to take on c4 with the rook. Yeah, structurally, that's fantastic. So I gave it another try, and after king d7, queen takes f7, let me ask you guys, what is possibly a good move here for black to actually consolidate and overtake the initiative? Oh wait, gotta be careful of the rook, remember? Rook is hanging. Whoops, not like that. Yeah, queen e8 definitely possible, but I think black can be even more ambitious here. Right, yeah, so queen h8, exactly. Once I spotted queen h8, I was like, oh, never mind. This position is actually great for black. Because all of a sudden, we have ideas of rook c2, rook takes h3 with check, rook h3 followed by rook c2, rook c2 first, then rook h3. And the king on d7 is actually surprisingly safe. Rook takes h3 is with check, right? So of course we can calculate bishop takes d5, but rook takes h3 check. We might not even have to take on d5, right? We might be able to just mate white on the spot there. One trick we have to notice, if bishop a3, how does black respond to this? I mean, there's a few ways, but what would be the cleanest? Rook h7, exactly. So I don't think this was actually all that difficult to calculate. I mean, it's multiple moves, right? But I think you guys were all capable of visualizing it. The main thing was just to not just reject the line just because we're moving our king to d7, right? At first, it felt like, okay, can't do that. That looks very risky. But once you actually look at the position and you actually start to evaluate it, then it's not so crazy to just leave your king on d7 because all of black's pieces are in the game. We have pressure. White is just kind of playing with one queen here. It's actually not that crazy that black is doing quite well. I think rook f5 actually, I'm sure black is better here as well. Queen h8 is just a little bit more active just because it comes with more direct threats. But yeah, at this point, game is pretty much over. White played rook f2, rook c3. I think black could have already taken and then played rook c3, but this is good enough. And now we're just threatening some kind of sack. And yeah, it was just game over. Okay, guys, I want to give you one more nice little endgame question. That was very tough for me. But let me put it on the board. It's actually from the same game we looked at earlier. It went down into the end game. And I want to ask you guys about this moment. Okay, so it's white to play. Actually, I'll back up a couple moves just so you guys can see what happens. Essentially, we had this endgame. We kind of traded into this. I've been trying to nurse an extra pawn. But at this point, we've made a lot of trades, and black is going to be winning back the a6 pawn. So white's only plan of winning this game, as I realized, is to win on the king side. Kind of classic, like we have outside pass pawn on a6. We just distract the king. We try to win on the king side, and we feel optimistic because we have knight versus bishop. The knight is very good on one side of the board. It can jump around and take pawns and stuff. So I played the move g4, which I think was quite strong. Just carving out some space and fixing black's pawns so that our king has a way in on the light squares. And you can already kind of imagine, like if white's king gets into g6, knight comes into f5, no way black is going to be able to hold that position. So king c6, king g2, king b5. Okay, this was kind of like critical moment where you have to figure out how to proceed from white. At this point, I actually had like, I think, something like 2 or 3 minutes on the clock. So, because we're in the end game, right? We're just playing on the 30-second increment. So I'll give you guys 3 minutes here, because also we're running out of time. And yeah, let me know what white should do. I would suggest using up the full 3 minutes because this is kind of the critical moment. So if you find the right idea here, the rest of the game you'll be able to play on 30-second increment. It'll be a lot easier. Okay, good suggestions so far, but really try to make sure, guys, because this is like, this decision could be the difference between a win and a draw. So it's like really, really critical decision. And unfortunately, chess is very tough. You can play good game for 4 hours, 5 hours. You mess up one decision like this, half point, sorry. It's just how it goes. So it's like so important to be precise in these moments. And I think the better players, you always see like they're just working so hard at the board. They're like exerting maximum energy. They're not relaxed. They're just like super, super focused because they know one mistake could blow the whole thing. Can blow your whole tournament, right, with one bad move. It's kind of unbelievable. But that's the nature of chess. So very important to stay calm and focused and yeah, looking for the best moves you can find. Okay, if you haven't submitted your answer yet, please do so in the chat. And yeah, let's talk about it. So basically, I think white has 3 good options here. Let's say 3 good options, 2 winning, 1 not so winning. I ended up choosing the 3rd best option. And yeah, let's go through what the options are. So right away, we have 2 moves. We can go a7 first, or we can go knight d6 check. So one of these 2 moves, I think we definitely should be considering. In the game, I started with a7. I think knight d6 actually was the easiest way to win. But here you have to see, I think someone did notice this one. I think Sanjana found this one, so nice job. Knight d6, king takes a6, knight e8, bishop f8, and very important, see knight c7 check at the end, and knight e6. And white wins the g7 pawn. Once we win this pawn, it's going to be very, very difficult for black to hold it, right? Bishop goes somewhere. We take, knight comes back to f5, h6 pawn is going to be super weak, the king can just walk up. Seems like black is just busted. Yeah, king gets to g6 and it's just game over. So this was actually the easiest way to win. Unfortunately for me, I didn't see knight c7, knight e6. I think I was mainly looking at knight f5 here. I was kind of assuming knight should go to f5, but then bishop f8, and I didn't see anything clear here. So I go with a7, which is still winning. Bishop takes, knight d6, king c6, and here white has two more options, so knight e8 and knight f5. Knight e8 was my first instinct, and again, if we can take g7, then I think we're just winning that very comfortably. And if g6, then we take on f6, and I thought this should be really, really good winning chances for white as well, because we won a pawn, black is left with a weak pawn on e5, and especially if we can get our king on e4, that's going to be really nice for our winning chances. The king on e4 is super strong. We can start maneuvering the knight, bouncing around, and yeah, we'll kind of see how white can... So just for example, let's say bishop c5, white goes king f3, bishop e7, knight g8, bishop f8, king e4, and now white starts kind of dancing around with the knight, but there are different plans here. One plan is to actually try to bring the knight over to d8 with check, and forcing the king back. So just for example, let's say knight b6, knight c4, and then bringing the knight, let's say h4, g5. This is just kind of sample line I was playing around with. Then finally white gets this check. King e7, there's like knight b7, and the king is coming in. King d7, knight f7, and now of course white has a big threat to just trade off the bishop. So this one essentially doesn't really hold for black. And yeah, so I was going to play that, and then I noticed, unfortunately for me, that knight f5, if g6, I can go knight e7 check and take the pawn. And then I was like, oh, well, that's a great structure. Then I get, you know, all these like light squares. So I end up playing knight f5. Again, I'm on the increment, you know, so what can you do? But now what's the problem? What's the best move for black here? What can black do that they couldn't really do in the other options? G5. Yeah, exactly. And my opponent found this move. A very nice move. So now I am getting the pawn, but the structure is completely different. Because no weakness, right? Pawn on f6 is very far away. And I can still win if my king, you know, got in. Black's king is like super close. So I was like, oh no. Yeah. Fortunately for me, I was still able to figure it out. So king d5 was played. Knight g8, king e6. I played king f3 here, because otherwise black is going to go e4. Bishop c5, knight h6. And here actually black missed the chance to draw. Kind of interesting. It's like it was at this moment. So black played king d5, which I think makes a lot of sense, because he's like just trying to stop me from getting in, and threatening e4. So he forces me to play e4, but then he's stopped my king from coming in, and now it's harder for white to make progress. But then he's forced to go back king e6. If he tries to stay active, there's knight g8, and white is winning the pawn, right? So king e6. But then this position actually turned out to be winning for white. And I'll show you guys kind of how I figured it out. I know we're running a little bit late, but it's okay. So what black should have done is start with this move, bishop f8, instead of playing king d5. And the point here is that, okay, knight goes to f5, now king d5, e4. This king can actually stay a lot more active, a lot harder for white to make progress. Now I don't have this knight g8 move. Here I think black is actually holding the draw, because my king is just very hard for white to get in. Black's king is just very strong. And yeah, I never want it. I never want to allow it in either. So The big difference was after king d5, e4, king is forced passive, and now I'm in time to kind of get some space with my king. And yeah, we reached this endgame, which turns out to be winning for white. Maybe you guys can quickly think of a nice plan that white could try to execute here. Because that's the main thing in these positions, like, you're up a pawn, you might be winning, it might be a draw, you might have some chances, you're not really sure what the evaluation is. Most important thing is to just find a plan to improve your position, right? Try to make some progress and try to see if you can pose some problems to the opponent. So what could be a possible plan here for white to actually win the game? So main break for white is to play h4 here. This is actually kind of the only thing white can even do. I would say there's kind of two plans here. One is to break with h4. Maybe the main plan is to try to use the knight to like scoot black's king out of the way, like Sanjana is saying, some kind of outflanking. And yeah, that was kind of my first idea. If I can get the knight to b4 with check, force the king, then I can try to slowly maneuver in with our own king. And that's often what we're trying to do in this position. So that's what I started with. And like, just kind of like a practical tip, if you have this h4 break, but you don't necessarily have to make it, sometimes it's better just to wait a little bit. Like first dance around with your knight, tire your opponent out. It's 30-second increment, so the more moves you make, the harder it gets just psychologically for your opponent to continue defending. Just jump around with the knight, see if you can do anything. And if the opponent defends well, then just put your knight back on f5 and play h4, right? And then it's like, try again, right? This is how you kind of just like maximize your chances. So knight e3, I start dancing around, bishop c5. Here I realize, well, if knight b4 check, black can actually just take this one, king b6, and there's no progress to be made in the king and pawn endgame because I can't really activate my king and black has the opposition. So I'm like, okay, time for a new plan. Knight e1, knight d3, knight f2, knight h1, because why not? Knight g3, bring the knight back to f5, and now h4. And so how is it winning? Well, we've made a little bit of progress, and we've opened up some new opportunities. So now what could white possibly do from here to make progress? And this is not something we had to figure out before we played h4. We could see that h4 was the only break. Now that we've got here, what can white do from here to kind of try to convert the position? Very important just to quickly find a way to improve our chances here. Yeah, I'm not sure if we can actually still go for this knight b4 plan. I'm not sure if black takes and goes king b6, if that's actually winning for white. Maybe with the plan of bringing the king back and pushing g5, but black's king will also get active. Yeah, so how can white keep making progress here? We can put the knight on d5, but then black will probably have time to put the bishop on d8, and then maybe we get knight b4 check from there. That's actually kind of a nice construction. We play knight to d5. Bishop has to keep this pawn defended, but we're also threatening knight b4 check, and maybe we can start making progress this way. Yeah, I think that's a good plan. So that's one way. The other thing is to put the knight on d3. From d3, we're also trying to play knight b4, but we're also putting pressure on e5, and then we get the second idea of breaking with g5. So that's the other thing white would like to do in this position. If we can get g5, force black to take with the pawn, we take this one, then black's one remaining pawn on g5 is going to be very weak, and then our king can start coming around, and then we try to win it with the knight, or maybe we win with the e-pawn. Because then once we get that structure, pass pawn on e4, then of course knight b4 check is very safe. So yeah, now it's all about just threatening to get this g5 in. Now here the opponent actually allows knight to b4. He goes bishop c5, bishop f2, knight d3, and now he can't really stop this one. But even if black kept the bishop, let's say, somewhere on this diagonal, then we're still getting g5 in. Let's say bishop d6 here. And I think we might have to dance around with the tempos a bit. But maybe we can bring the knight to h3. Not sure if we can get away with knight to b4 here. But yeah, basically the plan would be to try to get g5 in from here. I think this would have been a better way, because at least it's not so obvious how white should proceed from here. But I think this was the most stubborn defense. But yeah, also white could revert to this plan, which I like quite a bit, of bringing the knight to d5. In the game, we get bishop f2, knight d3, knight comes to b4, and now the king starts moving around, and now it's just a very simple task of just taking away new squares from black's king and just slowly pushing the king over. So king comes in. Now we bring the knight to the c5 square. White's king comes in even further, and then the plan is to just break with g5 and take on e5. Black played king g6, king e6, king g5, king f7. Here it's kind of over, because even if black is able to get into king f4, problem is white is always taking on f6, king takes f3, and then the king comes to f5. If we get that position, king on f5, king on f3, 2 pawns e4, g4, nothing black can do. Yeah, white's pawns are just rolling. Knight can take on e5 at any point. Black's king and bishop are just totally out of position. So here it's pretty much over. I play knight b2, and again, if black comes in and tries to take, then this position is just hopeless. Nothing black can do against knight c4. Knight takes e5, or just running the g-pawn. Yeah, just game over. So black didn't take, but it wasn't too hard to convert. Just brought the knight to e8, and kind of multiple plans here, either take on f6 or go knight e6, and yeah, it was game over here. Bishop h4 takes here, and now on takes, we can just take this one, and everything's defended. Black can't do anything, and yeah, game over. So okay, kind of got lucky to win this one anyway after g5, because actually black could have defended, but just goes to show a lot of times these critical moments, like, yeah, you miss one little detail and that's it. The position goes from a win to a draw. So you just have to be so precise. Chess is a hard game. We'll end with that. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. I think we got another one on Tuesday. So hopefully I will see you folks there. And yeah, let me open up the chat. And yeah, good work today. I'll catch you guys all next time. Yeah, have a good one.